So
Can you expand that piece you just said?
I think so.
You know, I feel this pervasive narcissism in the so-called spiritual community, and
Mhm.
I find it. You know, I laugh about it a lot, but I see all the ways, and you're helping me see many ways that I participate in it, and even maybe in some ways are guilty of bringing it to a broader audience. And I feel such a deep resistance to collapsing in a heap. You know, such a
Yeah,
deep resistance to it that
sure.
feels it feels. You know, you're the first person to suggest that I do. You know.
I think it's a moral stance to take, to collapse in a heap in a corner and to be lost, and to understand yourself to be utterly forsaken. And okay, how about this one? The sane response, the cultured response to wanting to be from somewhere is the willingness to belong instead. What do you mean by that? Well, everybody's listening to us believes they know the meaning of the word belong. But if you do the etymology of the word, you may be a little surprised to find that we have this BE in the front, which has the consequence in the English language of kind of intensifying, if you will. For example, bewildered doesn't mean to be vaguely confused. It means to be set upon by the wild. To be bemused doesn't mean to be vaguely entertained. It means to be set upon by the muse. And if you belong, it means to be set upon by longing.
Mm.
Ah, the very antithesis to what most of us assume belonging means, which is that it would extinguish our longing because we have instead, you see, we have this identity. Listen, imagine this. So, the likes of myself, perhaps yourself, and many others who are listening to us today, derive from a spontaneous mad migration that formed, North America as we understand it now. And in so doing, we lost so much by that migration ancestrally. I mean, it's basically informs our conversation today, the facts of that migration. And the cover story is, people seeking religious freedom and all that, blah, blah. And the truth, I mean, you look at the behavior and the historical record suggests something far darker than that, and truly so. So these people, and subsequently you and I, wake up every day in the absence of what we lost ancestrally by this mad flight. You have indigenous people on this continent who I don't pretend to speak for, but as an outsider, this is what I observe. They wake up every day in the presence of what they lost by virtue of our mad appearance on the scene. You compare those two awakenings every morning, and you compare those two losses, and you ask yourself, which is the deeper affliction? And I'm not sure I know the answer to that. Which is to
Mm.
more likely result in a kind of culture-wide madness that refuses to learn itself? I'm not sure I know the answer. But I know this. The likes of me have been, as I like to say now, tasked with the idea of awakening unto our grasping poverty that masquerades as sorrow. Sorrow is a saner response to this poverty than trying to fill it up with somebody else's what's left of their cultural achievements. Real sorrow is not a personal thing. Real sorrow, real grief is the kind of phantom limb of culture. That means that you have a sense, but you don't have a memory of a time that it must have been otherwise. You must have come from something tangible. If you're not willing to think that thought, you stand the distinct possibility of becoming a white supremacist. What? Them's fighting words, son. I know they are. Ask yourself, what befalls a person where white supremacy starts to look like sanity? It's some kind of endorsed inheritance. Well, first of all, we know that the ancestry they're crafting for themselves is purely a fantasy and doesn't exist anywhere. There is no white homeland. There's no quote unquote white culture and all of the rest. But you can hear the mad scramble to be from somewhere that's in it. What's the antidote? to learn that you are ancestrally from somewhere, actually a collection of somewheres. And they're not waiting for you to come back, son. There's nobody with a banner across the village square saying, welcome back, Steve. Welcome back, Daniel. Long time no see. Here's the real thing, baby. And have a nice day. And here's your 40 acres and a mule that somebody else will work your land for you, kind of thing. So what do we do? The answer is stop. Stop. Get hurt. No, I've already been hurt. No. I mean, the kind of hurt I'm talking about is not you're victimized. Imagine, okay, I mean, this just prompts one story after another, and we're probably starting to run out of time. But
we're not. Keep going.
Okay, very good. So I'm in England about a year and a half ago, and they take me to Plymouth. Yes, there's a real place, Plymouth. It ain't that big a place over there. And it's the mouth of the River Ply, actually, which is where the name comes from. I'm walking around at the docks there, and it's to the degree that any Northern European port is a working port any longer. It's a working port. There's some fishing boats and so on. I stumble on a sign that's no bigger than a shoebox, as I remember, on a little stake that's attached to one of these quays that juts out into the North Atlantic. And you know what it says? From this very pier in the year whatever it was, in quotation marks, Plymouth Fathers, I don't know what you call it in your country, the Founding Fathers or something like that. Mm-hmm. Whatever your mythology is about it, we don't have the same thing, but it said from this dock on that particular year, on this particular day, they set sail and put what you and I are talking about into motion. And I sat there and looked at it and I said to myself, baby, this is ground zero if there ever was one. And it's so unspectacularly attested to over there, as if their memory of what put North America into motion is a vague kind of parochial and not that big a deal. And I sat there as
Don't step on the grass.
Well, yeah. And I sat there as a North American, and I was so heartbroken to know, that these things began, or to learn again, I should say, that these things began in a particular place and time, that they're not human constants. I mean, that's one of the great spells that the West continues to labor under, that it's always been that way. People have always spilled out over the cliff edge of their cultural sanity and proliferated across the countryside, stealing other people's shit from now till doomsday. That's the way it's been. And there's nothing to be done except, to retreat wherever possible, etc. And, that's the spell talking. It's simply not true that there are people who refused to stop expanding. There are people who refuse to stop expanding. How come we don't know them? Because they stopped expanding. So the old adage from school that you learned the history of the victors, right? The winners, the guys who never stopped, the guys who were swollen and called that achieved. That's who we learned about. And guess who you're going to craft your understanding of what your life's job is from, but from heroic examples like this. And we never learned, stories where people died on schedule and their cultures went to their logical extreme and decided by virtue of sanity and a love for the world to go no further. We don't learn any of that kind of stuff. Could it be so? Of course it could be so. There have been people who are willing for the world to continue, but not for they personally to continue. Of course there are. We just don't find out about them, maybe until it's quote unquote too late.